Senator Watt, I think this is your chance.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. As you have observed, this is now my third partial contribution on this bill, and it would appear I probably have enough time to finish before question time. So it's, I'll try and make this about as exciting as Star Wars 3, and given this is NBN Speech 3. The one thing I do want to turn to, and what I've really tried to do so far in my previous two contributions, is to just outline some of the complaints that I know my office receives on a regular basis, and I know many others do as well, about poor NBN service quality and lack of coverage in too many parts of Queensland. I have already spoken, I think, in my first contribution about what this bill seeks to do and put forward Labor's position on that, so I may leave it at that in terms of the content of the bill itself. But in my remaining time, I just want to pick up on some very concerning news that emerged overnight that again demonstrates how much this government is leaving regional Australia behind when it comes to telecommunications and, in particular, the NBN. Now, as I say, my office on a regular basis receives complaints from people in regional Queensland, particularly central Queensland, where I'm most active, about poor NBN service quality. And I think when I ceased my previous contribution, I was talking about some of the horror stories that were put forward by central Queensland businesses when I hosted a roundtable several months ago with our Regional Communications Shadow Minister Stephen Jones. And the two that stick in my mind most were, and I should point out that both of the participants in this roundtable who raised these issues with me confessed that they were, pretty much lifelong LNP supporters, but that the poor service they had been receiving from the NBN under this government was actually most likely to shift their vote at the next election. So even if the government isn't serious about delivering good quality telecommunications, and NBN in particular, to regional and rural Australia, because it's the right thing to do, especially in a geographically decentralised state like Queensland, where good telecommunications are essential to businesses being able to compete with big urban centres and with the rest of the world. Even if they don't want to do it because it's the right thing to do, then there's a very good political reason for this government to start acting on regional communications as well. And as I say, the two instances that stick most in my mind from that roundtable were a motorcycle dealership who the proprietor of that shop was talking to me about the immense frustration she had with NBN services interfering with phone services and FPOS services. And what she was telling me was that pretty much from the time that the NBN was installed in her dealership, she had technical difficulties that kept arising with all of her technology. And she was able to point to numerous examples where customers had come into her store, literally were walking up to the counter with, in some cases, over $1,000 worth of goods that they wanted to buy. It might have been motorcycle helmets, it might have been jackets, it might have been all sorts of motorcycle related materials. They would walk up to the counter with, again, in some cases over $1,000 worth of goods that they wanted to purchase. They'd go to pay by FPOS and couldn't actually pay because the NBN difficulties were causing the shops all of their technology to go down, including their FPOS. They couldn't get a connection to bank services online, which meant that the customer couldn't pay for these goods. So the customer would say, look, I'll go up the road and get a bit of money out of the ATM. And too often customers would do that. They'd leave the store, leave their goods on the counter, walk out the door, allegedly to go up and get some money out of the ATM, but they'd never come back. So over and over again, this store was having customers walk out the door without paying, and effectively deciding not to go ahead with their purchase because of the FPOS and NBN-related difficulties that this store was happening. But even worse than that example was a florist store owner who attended our round table. And I think everyone knows, those of us who are in the habit of buying flowers for our spouses on Valentine's Day or our mothers on Mother's Day, everyone understands that if you're running a florist business, Mother's Day and Valentine's Day are probably your two biggest days of the year. And this florist was able to tell me that, I'm pretty sure it was last year was the year she was talking about, that on both Mother's Day and Valentine's Day, the biggest days of the year, her phone line went down, her NBN service went down, all of her technology went down because of NBN problems. You might as well cripple a florist store if it actually can't work effectively on Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, and that's what was happening here. So people understandably would ring up this florist, try to get their flowers organised, were told that they couldn't pay for them, it couldn't be done, so they went to the florist up the road and used that service instead. So these are some of those real-life examples where people in regional Queensland are already suffering from the poor NBN rollout under this government. But as I say, we got some more news about this overnight, which showed yet again how out of touch the NBN Co and this government as its overseer are with the needs of regional Australia when it comes to telecommunications. Because it emerged at the NBN Joint Committee last night that the NBN was planning a significant price rise for regional customers. And what came out in the questioning was that the NBN Co is preparing to introduce new wholesale prices that discriminate between rural and regional areas on the one hand and big metropolitan centres like capital cities on the other. And what they're intending to do is that if you are a customer in a metropolitan area, it might be Brisbane, it might be Sydney, it might be Melbourne, on a fixed line NBN service, the wholesale rate that is going to be applied will be $45. But if you live in a rural or regional area, it might be Rockhampton, it might be Townsville, it might be Mackay, it might be Western Queensland, in any of those places, and if you're on a fixed wireless network, then the price will be $65. So a $20 difference based on simply where you live and the technology that you're utilising. Now, as I say, good telecommunications is really an essential tool of business no matter where it's located in this day and age. It's the way that people can connect to their customers, to their suppliers on a quick and efficient basis. But under this government, the NBN rollout has been so poor that rural and regional Queenslanders and Australians are being left behind. And not only is that occurring as a result of the poor rollout, but now you've got the NBN Co wanting to actually discriminate on the basis of price as well. So rural and regional Queenslanders are going to be paying more for the privilege of having a worse service from the NBN than people living in Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne. That is unbelievable that a government that claims to represent rural and regional Australia would allow that to happen. Now, we hear over and over again from our National Party representatives in Queensland that they are the guardians of the bush, the guardians of rural and regional Queensland, but here's yet another example where they've let rural and regional Queensland down. They do it on penalty rates, they do it on labour hire, they do it on poor funding for rural and regional hospitals and schools, and now they're doing it when it comes to NBN as well. Where is there a single National Party representative from Queensland in this place who's actually prepared to get up and have a go at their own government for the second-rate system of NBN that is continuing to be laid out in regional Queensland and for discriminating against rural and regional Queenslanders when it comes to prices? Unfortunately, we're still waiting for that to happen. This bill does go some way to providing all Australians, whether they be city-based Australians or rural and regional Australians, with the kind of guarantee of good service that they are entitled to. As I've mentioned in a previous contribution, the first aspect of this bill is to legislate with certainty that all premises in Australia can continue to access high-speed broadband